Ever find yourself, I don't know, like checking a weather app or maybe scrolling through social media?
Mm,
Just everyday stuff.
yeah,
Well, congrats. You've already dipped your toes into the world of measurement.
that's right.
And today we are diving headfirst into Chapter 6 of Research Methodology.
Yeah, this chapter is all about measurement.
And trust me, this isn't some boring deep dive into textbook definition.
No, not at all.
It's about understanding how these choices about measurement, they seem simple on the surface,
Right.
but they can really have a huge impact on the decisions that we make, sometimes without us even realizing it.
Yeah, and that's what makes this so interesting, right? It's like we're making decisions based on measurements all the time, whether we realize it or not.
Totally.
And this chapter, it kind of pulls back the curtain on that whole process.
Yeah, they kick things off with this big statement. Good measurement is the bedrock of good decision-making.
I love that. They're not messing around. And you know what? They're not wrong.
No, they're not. I mean, think about it. Everything we do almost involves some kind of measurement.
It's true.
Whether you're buying something online, you're looking at reviews, you're thinking about, okay, do I trust these ratings?
Right. Are they legit?
Are they even measuring what they're supposed to be measuring?
Exactly. And that's a whole other can of worms.
It is. And that's where things get really fascinating. The chapter claims that just by understanding measurement better,
Yeah.
we can describe things more accurately, we can predict things, explain them, diagnose problems,
Make better decisions, ultimately.
make better decisions. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty tall order.
It is. But, the thing is, it's totally possible.
Okay.
And it all starts with understanding the core components of measurement.
Okay, so break it down for us. What are these core components?
So the chapter dives into these 4 scales of measurement. There's nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio.
Okay, wait, hold on. There are types of measurements.
Right.
See, I told you this was going to be interesting.
It's one of those things you don't really think about, right?
Yeah.
We just see numbers and figures and we're like, okay, that's the data.
Right. We kind of assume they all mean the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But it turns out the type of scale you're using, it's not just semantics. It actually dictates what you can do with the data, what kind of analysis you can even perform.
And this is where it gets really important because if you get the scale wrong,
Uh-oh.
your analysis can be totally meaningless.
Oh, I can already see how this could go wrong.
Oh, all the time.
Give me an example.
All right, so let's say we're looking at customer satisfaction ratings, right?
Okay, I'm with you.
We've got product A, it's got an average rating of, let's say, 4 stars.
4 stars solid.
Product B, it's got an average of 2.
Okay, so product A is looking pretty good.
Right. You might assume people like it twice as much, right?
Makes sense to me.
But here's the catch. What if those ratings, they're not on a scale where, 4 stars is actually twice as good as 2 stars?
What do you mean?
What if it's just an ordinal scale?
Ordinal.
Yeah, meaning they only show rankings.
Right,
Like
yeah.
1 is better than 2, but we don't know how much better.
I see.
So you can't really say people like product A twice as much, even though the numbers make it look that way.
So it's like that old saying, you can't compare apples and oranges.
Exactly. And you wouldn't believe how often this trips people up.
Really?
All the time. Just because someone ranks one movie higher on their list doesn't mean they enjoyed it twice as much as another one.
That's a really good point.
Mhm.
I've definitely been guilty of that kind of thinking.
We all have. But that's why understanding these scales, it's so important for anyone who wants to be a, savvy consumer of information, right?
absolutely.
It's about recognizing the limitations of the data before you even start drawing conclusions.
But it's not just about looking at the numbers. It's about understanding what those numbers represent.
Exactly. It's about asking the right questions before you jump to conclusions,
So basically, we can't just take measurements at face value.
especially in today's world.
All right, we're bombarded with data from every direction.
Exactly. And if you don't understand the foundation of that data, how it's measured, then you're really just, you're flying blind.
You're just along for the ride.
Exactly. And that's a recipe for disaster.
So we've seen how not all measurements are created equal.
Definitely not.
Like, who knew there were so many ways to think about a simple measurement,
Right. It's like we're so used to just seeing numbers.
Exactly.
But those numbers, they're built on this whole foundation of different scales and levels of measurement.
And as we learned, getting those scales wrong, that can really mess things up,
Yeah.
right? Like lead to some bad conclusions.
Oh, absolutely. It's like trying to build a house on a foundation of sand.
Okay, that's a terrifying thought.
Right.
Yeah.
You need that solid ground and that understanding of the scales to make sure any analysis you do is actually,
legit.
Legit, exactly.
Okay, so let's say, we're designing a study.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe we're just trying to make sense of some data that's been put in front of us.
Yeah.
How do we make sure that from the get-go, we're even using the right measures?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Right.
And thankfully, Chapter 6, it actually walks us through, like step by step, how to create a measure from scratch.
Oh, really? They give us the whole process.
Yeah, the whole shebang.
Yeah.
And it's more involved than you might think, which is a good thing.
Okay, so tell me more about this process. Where do we even start?
So it all starts with purpose.
Purpose, okay.
You got to be crystal clear on why you're even measuring this thing in the first place. What are you trying to do with this data?
So before we even collect anything, we need to know what we want to do with it.
Absolutely. Are you trying to predict something?
Like,
Like, I don't know, employee turnover?
okay.
Or are you trying to evaluate, like, how effective a new program is?
Got it. So the purpose really shapes everything that comes after.
Exactly. And once you've got that purpose locked in, then you can really define the attribute itself.
Define it, okay.
And I mean, like, with laser precision.
Laser precision, all right.
So let's say we're measuring job satisfaction.
Right.
We have to ask ourselves, what does that actually include?
Yeah, what does that actually mean?
Right. Is it just, like, do you enjoy the actual work you're doing?
Right.
Or is it, like, your work-life balance? How's your relationship with your boss, your colleagues?
It's like, are you happy to show up every day, or are you counting down the minutes until you can leave?
Exactly. So you got to draw those lines in the sand.
Okay.
What's in the measurement? What's OUT?
Otherwise, we're back to comparing those apples and oranges again.
Exactly.
You got it.
Okay, so we've got our purpose. We've defined what we're measuring. What's next?
All right, so now it's time to build your measurement plan. This is like your blueprint, right?
Okay, the blueprint.
Your roadmap for data collection. You're deciding how you're going to actually get this data.
So what does that actually look like?
Well, you're thinking about the format of your questions. Are you going to do, like, multiple choice open-ended questions?
Right. What kinds of responses are you going to allow? Are you going to do interviews, surveys?
Okay, so it's kind of like designing the whole research project from the ground up.
Exactly. And a crucial part of that is testing it out.
Testing it.
Yeah, like before you go full steam ahead, you want to pilot test your measure.
Oh, right, like a test run.
Exactly. You got to see how real people are going to respond to your questions.
Right, because sometimes you get those surveys and you're like, wait, what are they even asking here?
Yes, exactly. And it's way better to find that out before you launch your big research project. Right?
Way better.
So that's where item analysis comes in.
Item analysis.
Yeah, you're looking at each question. You're asking, is this question too easy, too hard? Is it actually measuring what we think it's measuring?
Oh, I see. So, like, if we're measuring leadership potential,
Right.
a good question would clearly tell the difference between someone who's got that potential and someone who, maybe not so much.
You got it. And that brings us to two super important concepts, reliability and validity.
Okay, here we go. Now, these are two words I hear thrown around a lot.
All the time.
But to be honest, I'm not always sure I could explain the difference. What is it about reliability versus validity?
All right, so think of it this way, right?
Okay.
Reliability, that's like a friend who's always on time. You know they're going to be there when they say they will.
Okay, I like that.
A reliable measure, it gives you consistent results, whether you use it today, tomorrow, or even if different people are using it.
So if my bathroom scale gives me a different number every time I step on it.
Not reliable.
Not reliable.
Yeah, it's like a flaky friend.
Exactly. You can't rely on them. Now, here's the thing. A measure, it can be reliable without being valid.
Wait, what? How is that possible?
Okay, so let's say that bathroom scale is consistently 5 pounds off.
Okay.
It's reliable, right?
Because it's always wrong in the same way.
Exactly. Always 5 pounds off. But it's not valid because it's not giving you your true weight.
It's like a broken clock that's right twice a day, consistently wrong. Yes, exactly. So validity is all about whether you're actually measuring what you think you're measuring.
Okay, so it's like reliability is about consistency and validity is about accuracy.
You got it. And you need both for good decision making.
Right, because what good is a consistent measurement if it's consistently wrong?
Precisely. And that's why this chapter, it dives into all these different ways to actually estimate both.
Estimate reliability and validity.
Exactly. How do you know if your measure is reliable? How do you know if it's valid?
So we're not just talking about these concepts in the abstract. We're actually getting into the nitty-gritty of how to assess them.
Exactly. This is where the rubber meets the road.
And why should we care about this? Why does this matter for, the average person?
Because this is about making sure the data you're relying on, the data that's informing your decisions, it's actually good data.
So we're arming ourselves against bad data.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got our reliable measures, they're valid.
Yeah.
We even have our trusty measurement plan, right?
Right. It's all coming together.
But how do we know, if these measurements can really hack it in the real world?
I'm glad you asked that. Because Chapter 6, they dive into this real-world case study.
Okay.
And it's all about corporate governance research, which I know doesn't sound super exciting.
No, not exactly a page turner, but go on, I'm intrigued.
But it actually has some really important lessons for anyone who uses data to make decisions.
Okay, I'm listening. Corporate governance. What's the case study about?
So it focuses on this relationship between board independence, right, and how well a firm performs.
Okay, so are companies with more independent boards, like boards that aren't, beholden to the CEO or anything, do they actually perform better? Is that the question?
That's exactly the question. And, previous research on this, it had kind of mixed results. Some studies said yes, some said no. It was a whole thing.
Okay, so what do they do? Throw out all the old data and just start from scratch?
Well, not exactly. See, this case study, it argues that the problem wasn't necessarily the data itself, but how they were measuring these key concepts in the first place.
So instead of just scrapping everything, they decided to kind of fine-tune their measurements.
Precisely. So instead of just looking at the percentage of independent directors on a board, like a simple number,
Right.
they dug a little deeper. They started looking at things like, okay, do these board members have financial ties to the company?
Oh, interesting.
Do they have other relationships that could, potentially compromise their objectivity? It's like anyone can call themselves independent.
Right, but it's the details, the stuff underneath the surface that really tells the story.
Exactly. And they did the same thing with measuring firm performance, too.
Oh, so they didn't just stop with the board. They looked at how they were measuring the company's success, too.
Yeah. Because instead of just using those traditional financial metrics, like return on assets or return on equity.
Yeah, this can be kind of narrow, right?
Right. They also started looking at total shareholder return, which is really like the ultimate measure of how much benefit the shareholders are actually getting,
Right, because at the end of the day, that's what matters to them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they upped their measurement game on both sides of the equation. And what happened?
What happened? Did it actually make a difference?
Huge difference. By using these, more nuanced, more relevant measures,
Yeah.
the relationship between board independence and firm performance, it became way clearer. They actually found a much stronger correlation than any of the previous studies had shown.
Wow. So just by, improving how they were measuring things,
Yeah.
they were able to unlock this whole new level of understanding about how corporate governance actually works, and that's amazing.
It really highlights just how important measurement is for any kind of research, any decision-making process, really.
So it's not just about the data itself, it's about how we choose to measure it.
Exactly. Even these seemingly small changes, how you define something, how you measure it.
It can have a massive impact on your conclusions.
This has been honestly so eye-opening. As we're kind of wrapping up our deep dive here into the world of measurement,
Yeah.
what's the one big takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with?
Don't take measurement for granted. That's it. That's the big one.
That's good advice.
Whether you're, I don't know, evaluating research, making a decision about your business, or even just trying to make sense of the news or something.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Being mindful of how that information is measured can really help you make better decisions.
Hey, measure twice, cut once, but for data.
Exactly.
I love it. Ask yourself, what's an important decision I need to make, and could I improve the way I'm measuring the information that's going into that decision?
There you go.
That is a great question, and on that note, we're going to leave you to ponder that.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time for, who knows what we'll unpack next time.